So now our second guest on our panel is Dr. John Tate. He just arrived by flight today, so thank you for being here. So Dr. John Tate is an experienced private practitioner. He has practiced for 9 years, and he owned and managed 2 hospitals. He is also a professor at numerous universities as Michigan State University, Atlantic Veterinary College, College of Cornell University of Veterinary Medicine, Mississippi State University. He teaches business and financial planning and practice management in all these College of Veterinary Medicine. He is also part of the board of directors of the Ontario Veterinary Medical Association. He is also a part-time faculty of OVC. He's an international speaker. His biography is non-ending, so his numerous accomplishments, and we're very honored to have him today. Please welcome Dr. Tate.
Thank you.
And now for our third panelist. Usually it'd be really hard to have a dentist come and speak at a veterinary conference, but we decided to try to invite one to come because we wish to have a different perspective of our profession. So, because he is my father, I succeeded in twisting his arm, and he accepted to come and be part of this panel, even though he's very busy building a beautiful network of clinics in the eastern of Canada based on a solid practice and clientele-based approach. Please welcome Dr. Alain Thivierge.
So I'm going to be driving the discussion as we did with the students. I don't know if you're going to be as good as them, so we'll see how good you are. So we'll actually try to limit response time so that we can keep this as active as possible, and that we can give as much time to the other panel members to respond. So first question is, let's just summarize. What is how do you define a successful veterinary practice? Maybe John. Maybe. Oh, sorry.
Faut-tu lever notre main?
Oui, on peut. J'avoue, juste un coup d'œil comme ça, j'avoue. Donc, maybe start with John, and then we'll go with also dentistry practice. How do you define success?
Sure. I think my short answer would be that we know a good dentist. My answer for a successful veterinary practice can be defined in a number of ways, financially and so on, but I would say that it's driven by the staff. A successful veterinary practice has a team that works together well, a team that has a low turnover rate, is content in their jobs, and in a service-based industry, if that's the case, it will become a client-centered practice and also be able to generate new clients and result in the growth that you need to keep a practice sustainable and growing. So I think content staff will lead to what the ultimate value equation is in our profession, which is perceived value on the part of our clients, and one leads to the other, and if you have that, automatically the practice is successful financially.
Dr. Thivierge, how do you define success?
I'll parallel what John said, because there's a lot of simple and same particularities of both practices. One, is the welcoming to the patient into the office. The other one is to have the quality of procedures. The other one is the follow-up on the procedures. And I would add to that the retaining of the patients, bringing in new patients and then retaining them. And we tend to want to value, I call the dental IQ of the patient, get them to make dentistry, their oral health a priority. In your case, it would be to take care, as you mentioned, of the animal, the pet, make sure it becomes a priority that this animal is taken care of, and that the clinic does a follow-up after to make sure that they know you care about it.
Heather?
For me, it's the combination of qualitative and quantitative understanding of your business model. As much as I would have historically said we would come at this from a qualitative perspective in having a happy team and whatnot, I find there's so many things you can do now in clinical practice that you also have to have a quantitative understanding of your business. You have to understand the benchmarks and understand how those apply so that you can apply your limited time, resources, and financial resources into areas to build your business very strategically.
And quickly, who defines that your practice is successful? Is it your accountant, your clients, your employees, or your partners? Who does? Who defines the success?
Well, I think it's all of the above. In part, it's all of the above. The trickle-down results always show up in the way the practice performs financially. But without clients as the drivers, none of that will happen. But as Heather mentioned, we've come a long way in companion animal medicine to establishing benchmarks, in other words, targets of optimal performance. So the profession itself has helped define what that success should be.
Yeah, I think having a handle on the metrics of the practice, that's one way of defining success. And the other one, you might be feeling really great about your practice, and your accountant will be knocking on your window in the morning and saying it's not going to work. So there's a fine balance between the reality of running a business and then the reality of taking care of the patients.
What changes have you seen, or it could be actually applied to dentistry also, but changes that you've seen in the veterinary profession or the dentistry profession in the past years? Heather.
I think one of the big changes we've seen is in veterinary medicine changing reminder systems, and I think we've actually followed the dental system. We've learned from the dental system.
We're not there yet, though, huh?
We're not there, but in terms of pre-booking, next appointments 6 months out, 12 months out, and then appropriate reminder systems to make sure that the client stays engaged. One of the things that we're seeing in vet medicine is this, we call it client deferral rather than client defection. And what we mean by that is clients are falling outside of their 12-month window of bringing their pets back into the practice. So improve reminder systems and learning a bit from the dental profession brings them back in within that 12-month window, which is making a big difference.
How do you do it?
We call it a recall system. Patient leaves, and you reschedule them back 3, 4, 9 months, whatever they need to be. Now, one of the main differences we have, I look at vets as a pediodontist, dentist for children, whereas your client, you're talking to them, but your patient, unless you're like Mrs. Goodall, you can't really talk to them. So you have to go on what the feeling of the owner is. Now, when we deal with children, the child often cannot talk to us. He's just a heap of nerves, and we become a heap of nerves after. That's another story. And so we deal with the parent. So we have to make sure the parent knows, bring this child back in 2 weeks and 3 weeks.
You're very successful in actually having the clients come back. When they leave the hospital or your dentistry practice, they already know when they're coming back. How do you cope with the reality that now there's a lot more maternity leave because of because there's a lot more women in dentistry and in veterinary medicine? How do you know that the schedule in the future will not be the same or will be the same?
Okay, that's a good point. I'll touch on it lightly. The feminization of the profession. Medicine's already been feminized, but vet is, and dentistry is becoming 65% women. So it has to be in your model of your clinic. You have to know that the young vet, the woman, will be leaving in maternity within a year, 2 years. I mean, the young women are certainly not staying up knitting all night, so something's going to happen. And you got to set that up and get ready for it. So you need to have a pipeline of other vets, or in our case, dentists, that will come in and supply, if you want, in their work in that time period. Sometimes you need 2 or 3 to do part-time work. But if you don't do that in your business, you will absolutely hit a wall, and it will not be a nice situation between you and your vet that's gone off on maternity. And it's totally normal. If they're not getting kids, we're not here.
John, have you seen this in the practices that you evaluate, or that there's a clash between this reality now?
There is, and I think to go back to your original question, the role of the veterinarian, if we go back in time, was more of a guardian type role, where you said to a client, you should do this, and they did it. And largely that was a baby boomer driven generation, where that's the information they took from their healthcare providers. Nowadays, and I speak to a lot of students and I tell them, you're no longer an information provider, you're an information clarifier, because there's so many channels clients come in with information from, often incorrect, And as a result, we've moved now into a more collaborative relationship, but that doesn't work always across demographics, either internally with staff or in the staff-client relationship as well.
How keep staying on this subject, because this is a reality that there's a lot more women coming in, and how do you get them engaged in actually buying into practices, becoming entrepreneurs, and seeing the positive side of this reality that you are all entrepreneurs. So how do you make them see this positive part of veterinary medicine? John?
I think there's two sides to it. I think there's the pure financial return, which there should be. If you're going to become an owner, you're taking on more risk, you're going into debt, you're expanding your role into management as well. But there should also be a qualitative life balance side. And nowadays we have business models where we have the so-called fractional ownership model, where you can own 20-25% of a practice, work 2 or 3 days a week, spend time at home with your family as well. And the profession supports that. So as a result, the attraction to ownership by changing the business models from one practice, one vet, has certainly evolved to accommodate the changing demographic.
Is that your opinion on this?
I agree totally, and I think that actually the way it's structured now with a lot of women in vet medicine, it actually lends itself better, because historically we would have men that were clinically oriented and you couldn't get them out of the practice. They were in the practice 80 hours a week. Now with children and responsibilities, what I'm finding is a lot of women owners enjoy their time at home to do management functions for the practice, which are really important. And then when they're in the clinic, they're doing their clinical work. So I find for a lot of women owners, it's very attractive because it can do a hybrid with all of our software systems. We can remote tap in from home. We can run the numbers. We can do a lot of the business management. So I think it's a beautiful hybrid that works well, but you have to be flexible and adaptable to their needs.
Is that the same reality in dentistry practice?
It is absolutely the same situation, whereas women might want to be partners, as sometimes the men will. And if they do want, as John said, it could be fractured out, and it's a lot easier that way. And it just makes for a better running clinic.
So you feel because now, in the veterinary world, most practices are still owned by baby boomer veterinarians who actually probably built this practice, bought it from scrap, or made it to where it is right now, where the veterinary industry actually evolved to becoming what it is right now, which is completely different than what it was 20 years ago when they started those practices. So they've seen the quality of the practice increase. They've seen the quality of their financials increase. They've seen where they're at, and you get to this stage where owners feel like they've built all this and now need to to give this to somebody else or to sell it to somebody else, which is usually now women coming in and that don't have the same vision of what it is to be an owner. So how do you prevent this clash of personality or a clash of realities so that we can actually get those practices in the hands of young veterinarians, young women veterinarians? How do you make this happen?
I'd say at first it starts with the initial meeting and the first interview that you're doing with the person. You need to know, do they want to stay on board? Do they want to be part of the project management? Or do they just want to work and then at the end of the day put down, in my case, the drill and go home? And it's all okay. You need to know as an owner, how are you going to set up the transfer of the business?
But if you're not, I'll just challenge you on this, and maybe you can actually go on to that, but if you do get a person that says, no, I don't want this type of model for me as a woman, I want to have my family also, but I want to be maybe part owner, and you're not ready to give me that, then she's just not going to buy in. And then somebody else, either a corporate hospital or or another type of owner will come in, and you will lose this. So is there a way to prevent this person from saying, no, this is not the model that I want, and just to turn around and just go away, and to find some like a mid-ground? Is there a way, or Heather?
So I'm going to speak to this because I happen to be the mother of a new veterinarian, and she graduated in 2015, and she was a veterinarian that absolutely loves clinical medicine and said, I have no interest in owning a practice. I have absolutely no interest in the management business side of it. And within a year and a half, she is now saying, Oh, I would like to be a business owner, and I think people, they change their behavior for one of two reasons. They either change their behavior because the notion of something better is ahead, or they change their behavior because they're disappointed or unhappy with the status quo. And I think that for a lot of veterinarians, ultimately they are entrepreneurs, and they see things, how practices are run, that they think, I would do it differently, I want to do it differently. And as long as we have exposure at both, I think, the school level and the professional level with consultants, with business education for both the dentistry profession and the vet profession, exposing them to tools that they can utilize, I think you'll find that they will roll into desire for business ownership pretty
How'd
quickly.
she change her mind? What did she do what did you do to her that she changed her mind?
You know, I think it's experiential. As she got into clinic, she started to think about the things she would do differently, she would do better, she would focus more on pet owners, etc. And even facilities, equipment that she would have, CE courses she would take that would better serve the demographic. That all is a real driver for her. And I've encouraged her to go to business lectures as well and learn about managing a practice.
John?
And not to throw a little bit of a downer on this concept, but the truth is that if you have a 60-year-old male veterinarian who wants to sell the entire practice and a 30-year-old female veterinarian who wants to buy 25% of it, it simply may not be a fit, and opportunities are lost in today's marketplace because of that, and the owner has to move on to an alternative, as does the younger veterinarian.
Is it a question of preparation, that the 60-year-old veterinarian who wants to sell his practice did not prepare? He did not foresee this, or even if he had foreseen it, the gap would have been too big?
I think a lot of them don't foresee it. I mean, I do a lot of succession planning, and I run into a lot of veterinarians who think they're going to live forever, or they're going to work forever, and that's simply not the reality of the world in the marketplace either. So preparation is key. In fact, I'll often quote that if you have a business with an owner in their pre-retirement life stage, which is usually 60 years old or older, and they don't have a succession plan, you have a business that's at risk. So I would encourage practice owners to start early, because when the time comes for you to have your practice succession planned or evaluated and so on, you can't do it quickly.
I'll agree with John, because now that we're seeing more women into the workforce, that model will probably change, but because it's more men in, the valuation for the man was his business for the last 40 years. He fed his family, sent his kids to university, and he does not want to let go of that baby. That's his baby.
The founding father syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very difficult. So he gets to a time period where he says, geez, I need to sell it, but I should have started 5 years ago. That's unfortunate. But
Heather,
yes.
you see that gap too?
Yep, 5 to 10 years, we recommend people begin their succession process. And I think the reality is often the financials are too large, and we're seeing it move from a single or partnership to 2 partners or 3 or 4 buy in together. It's just the necessity based on the financial models now.
So we've defined success with actually owning a practice, but are there ways of defining success for an associate veterinarian who did not buy into a practice? Well, how do you define his success?
Absolutely.
Or her success?
I would say the loyalty of the patients. In your case, the animal or the owner, and I'd say the link with the community. I mean, if this young vet walks through the community and people are happy to see him or her, then that's a success. You're integral part of the community. You have to be. You absolutely cannot work in your vet hospital, your dental clinic, and walk out, close the door, and be incognito. Because if not, you're cheating yourself out of some really good success feeling.
John, do you have something to say about this?
I think for an associate veterinarian, many of them do have very fulfilling careers without ever becoming an owner, whether they're just risk averse or whether they just don't want the burden of ownership and so on. To me, it's if their goals, their personal goals are being met, and their professional goals are being met in terms of the type of interventions and patient care and so on they're doing. To me, that's success in that role.
And I think people are motivated by different things, and some of us are motivated more by intrinsic reward with a relationship, and others are more by extrinsic reward, which is financial compensation. So that's where I think practices have to be creative with ProSal, where people are paid potentially on production to invest them, or they find ways to recognize and reward their associate veterinarians that they want to stay and do an excellent job.
Yeah, that's another point. I mean, we're talking about associates. They're not actually don't have any part in the results at the end of the year, so they don't get any profits from the hospital. How do you reward a successful associate veterinarian in a practice without actually having conflict of interest and making sure that they're well rewarded for their hard work? How do you do that?
I think you need to explain what the word reward means. Is it just financial? Is it?
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be financial. It could be financial, but we know that there are actually other ways to reward actually employees, and some don't respond to the financial reward. So how do you reward them as a whole?
And that's the key. And I think there's been actually some data gathered on what are potential reward tactics in practice, and many of them are qualitative: time off, recognition, advancement, increased authority over a certain project or an area, and so on. Some are quantitative, as Heather mentioned, like ProSal, or a commission-based type of pay. And I think it really depends on where they rank those rewards in importance to them. But many practices have very successful reward structures for their associates without ever having to share in ownership, as long as they're meaningful.
Sorry, let's be clear, so some people might not know what ProSal is. It's actually having a base salary with a percentage-based bonus on top of the salary, right?
Yeah, it's based on production. Yeah. And so we see that, and I'm seeing an increase. And I think ProSal works really well in hospitals that have an absent or semi-absent ownership. What I actually am finding works better in a lot of practices is a bonus structure. If you are an owner or a manager that's spending enough time in practice, you know who your great associates are. You know who your clients are asking for, and if you're that vested in your business, you can set up beautiful bonus structures that aren't necessarily based on production, which I find are attractive for everybody involved. But it also means sharing some of your financials with your associates, which is pretty important.
Dr. Siviage, how do you reward those? Do you have the same structure where some dentists are actually not owners in your practices, and there's only some owners and the other ones are just salary based?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and how do you reward them as a whole?
Some are financial. Yeah, you have to read what they want. A lot of the younger generation coming in really are not that financially hungry. They will when they start paying taxes and have children and many animals. And but others, it's time off. John is right. It's sometimes just new pieces of equipment, the latest technologies. You study that out with them.
So what do you think is most important for those young women veterinarian coming into practice? What will be the main motivator for them to be happy in their practice? Heather, you have a smile.
Mentoring.
Mentoring.
Yep. I find that I can speak with my daughter and all of her classmates. It's mentoring is getting really, really good support in what they do. Obviously, when they graduate from veterinary school, they have a lot of skills, but they are not on top of their game. So that first 5 years, I think mentoring and emotional support as well as medical technical support, because there's a lot to deal with clients and emotions there as well. So I think that's key.
Feel the same way, John?
I do, and I would complement it with training. They're often confused as being the same thing, but training is the technical skills, and mentoring is what Heather described. And if they can bring both up together, they're happier.
Yeah,
and doing panels like what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
We like to do that with our younger dentists. We'll go out either to a restaurant or we'll go out and do a continuing education and just spend some time together and just think it over, what we just saw and how we can apply it. So there's an appartenance.
Quick,
it
but
creates a feeling of
Thank
belonging.
you very much for your participation in this. Thank you.
Thank you.